This Torah class is brought to you by TorahAnytime.com.
Okay, if you're back, no problem. If you're back, if you want to take a look at the Rush in the back of the Gemara, because the Gemara said that where do we learn out that one has to divorce their wife after 10 years of infertility? We learn it out from Abraham that at the end of 10 years of living with Sarah, he married Hagar. But then the Gemara said, L'lamedcha, this teaches you that the years living in Chutz Haaretz do not count. Now that's a pella. The simple way of reading the Gemara is, if a couple lived in New York, and lo yaleinu, they did not have children, then this halacha would not apply and dictate that the husband has to divorce the wife, as the Gemara says, that the years of Chutz Haaretz do not count, because we could say it's not because you're infertile, it's because you're violating the sin of living outside of the Holy Land. That is the opinion of the Ra'avan. Let me see if I could pull that up for you. I photocopied that before. Let me just get that up. That is the opinion of the Ra'avan, that this din does not apply in Chutz La'aretz. Okay. Share screen. Here we go. Beautiful. So, look in the Ra'avan. The Ra'avan says, it's on your screen, V'hani mili be'eretz Yisrael. This whole din applies in the Holy Land. Aval b'chutz la'aretz, outside of Eretz Yisrael, kivan da'amri. Once the Gemara says, L'lamedcha, this comes to teach you, she'ein yeshivas chutz la'aretz oila loy min haminyan, that living in the Holy Land does not count. Nira li, it would seem to me, the ein koifin. We do not force couples outside of Israel to get divorced, because not because they're infertile, it's because they're wicked. They don't live in Israel. Okay? So that is the opinion of the Ra'avan, and as well as other Rishonim. I'm going to tell you who else holds that way. That is the opinion of the Ravya and the Hagois Maimoni. Fine. Comes the Rush. Can I trouble you if you have a Rush in the back of your Gemara? The Rush is Siman Yud Beis. It's Parak Shishi, Siman Yud Beis. The Rush says, V'yesh roitzim loymar, there are some Rishonim who want to say, so again, this is the Rush, Parak Shishi, Halacha Yud Beis, V'yesh roitzim loymar, there are those who want to say, the Haidina, the Shah, Ima, Eser Shanim, the din that one has to divorce their wife after 10 years, Einoi Noyeg B'chutz Haaretz, does not apply in the Holy Land. The Talinan Ba'oinesh Diras Chutz Haaretz, we suspended and hinged on the sin of living outside of Eretz Yisrael, Keda Ashkechan Gabe Avraham, like we find by Abraham, She Yeshivas Chutz Haaretz Loi Olo Loi Min Haminyan. Avram didn't marry Hagar in Chutz Haaretz. So some Rishonim hold this din does not apply outside of the land of Israel. And the Rush summarily dismisses this view, saying it's completely unreasonable to say that one would not have to divorce their wife if they live in Chutz Haaretz, as if you live in Chutz Haaretz, it's such a grave sin that maybe that's why one did not have children. Because the Rush says 99.9% of couples in Chutz Haaretz have children. So what kind of rationale would it be that if someone lives in Chutz Haaretz, he wouldn't have to divorce his wife, because maybe it's because of the sin of Chutz Haaretz? Says the Rush that V'loi mistaber klal lahiris kain, it's not reasonable at all to paskin this way, sheyivatel adam mipere v'rivya, that someone should lose out on puravu b'svara ru'azua, because of this weak svara. Da chazinan, because we see ruba de inshi shaparan v'ravim b'chutz haaretz. The majority of people procreate outside of Eretz Yisrael. Ula echad mine elef shaloi zacha libanis meisha achas. You're going to say the 1 out of 1,000 that's not zoicha to have children from this one woman. Oh, you know why? Nisalai ba'anish diras chutz haaretz l'pajim. We're going to say it's because of the sin of chutz haaretz. So therefore, you don't have to be mekayim the mitzvah. It's absurd. 99.9% of couples have children in Chutz La'aretz. So the guy who doesn't, you're going to say, you know why? It's because of Chutz La'aretz. Maybe it's because he can't have children. Maybe it's because she can't have children and he should get remarried. The other thing is, this whole Sugya, all these rabbis talking over here, where do you think they live? These are Israelis. These are all Babylonian rabbis. So why, if this din did not apply in Babylon, why are they so busy with this subject? V'gam kolelo amaram de Bavel de Shak v'Torah b'Haydina kulam levnei Eretz Yisrael Shak v'Torah. Oh, why are you learning this sugya? It's for our cousins in Israel. Come on, why are they spending so much time? It's not relevant to them. V'loi lahem. And Reb Abba Bar Zavda, who said, if I would merit Havali mi kamaisa mi Bavel Hava di akim pirkei Rav Huna. So you'll ask, if it's unreasonable to say that one doesn't have children because of living in Chutz La'aretz, so why did the Gemara say that for Avraham the years in Chutz La'aretz don't count? I thought it's not reasonable to attribute a lack of children to being in Chutz La'aretz. The answer is it's not reasonable for most people, but for Abraham, who is specifically commanded, get out of Chutz La'aretz and go to Israel, so for him, that maybe it's because of his sin of being in Chutz La'aretz. Umashlei also la'Avram yeshivas Chutz La'aretz if he should see v'lo yamakim lech lecha me'artzecha el artz asher areka. So you say, but he went, didn't he? Listen to this Rush. It says the Rush, when Avram was told lech lecha v'nisatzel, he was lazy. V'lo halach, he didn't go. Why? Listen to this. How old was Avram Avinu by the Bris Bein HaBesarim? Avraham was 70 years old by the Bris Bein HaBesarim. Where did the Bris Bein HaBesarim take place? In Israel. And how old was Avraham when he went to Haran? He was 75. What happened? Avraham at age 70 went to Eretz Yisrael. Then he went back to Haran. And God said, Go to Israel! Why'd you leave? And Avram didn't go right away. He waited until he was 75 years old. So the bottom line is, the Rosh is of the opinion that this halacha applies in Chutz La'aretz as it does in Eretz Yisrael. And you cannot hinge and say, well, if somebody's living in Chutz La'aretz and he doesn't have children, he doesn't have to divorce his wife. He absolutely does. And those years count. And if he waited 10 years and he didn't have children, don't blame it on living in Chutz La'aretz. So far we have two shitos in the Rishonim. We have the shita of the Ra'avan that this din does not apply in Chutz La'aretz. And we have the opinion of the Rosh that it does apply in Chutz La'aretz. And there's a third opinion, who Reb Chaim Kanievsky sort of advises based on. And I'll say it outside and then I'll show you quickly inside. Do you see my, you see this? What's going on here on my home screen? You see the Ramban now? Yeah, okay. The Roshita Saramban is like this. If somebody is living in America and they're married for 10 years without children, the halacha dictates they have to get divorced. However, what if the husband says, I don't want to get divorced. Let's go to Israel. Oh, you want to go to Israel? Then the shot clock starts again. In other words, of course the halacha applies to Chutz La'aretz as well. That in Chutz La'aretz, one would have to get divorced, because if somebody doesn't have children, then we don't blame it on the sin of living in Chutz La'aretz. However, if the person wants to make the move and go to Eretz Yisrael, then we say perhaps now in the zechus of living in Eretz Yisrael, you'll be zoichet to have children in Eretz Yisrael, you don't have to get divorced. So the Ra'avan holds the din doesn't apply in Chutz La'aretz. If somebody's married in Chutz La'aretz, they don't have children, they don't have to divorce their wife. The Rosh says it applies equally in Chutz La'aretz. And if we could take a look at this Ramban over here, let me just try to make it bigger somehow. The Ramban says, look where my arrow is. Umistabra nami da'afilu b'chutz la'aretz mafkinon zeh mafkinon. It's mistaber in chutz la'aretz, he would have to get divorced. Zeh nusach devei harav zal. V'lo hutzrach l'chol zeh, li yeshamar shemisha sham ishtay b'chutz la'aretz. Ubaloi la'aretz, someone who lives his life in chutz la'aretz, and then he comes to Eretz Yisrael. Ein yeshivas chutz la'aretz oy l'olay min aminyan. Living in chutz la'aretz doesn't count. Shema zuchus Eretz Yisrael tamad loy. Maybe the merit of Eretz Yisrael will stand for him. But if someone who just lives in chutz la'aretz and doesn't want to leave, then after 10 years he would have to get divorced. Now we mentioned, and I'm going to close with this section, that this halacha does not seem to be practiced b'zman hazeh, that we don't usually find that if unfortunately a couple is not blessed with children, that they get divorced after 10 years. So the Ramah in Even Oezer Siman Aleph, he writes, Bizman hazeh, the Mechaber says, Misha Avrol of Esrim Shana, the Ramah says, even though the Shulchan Aruch says if someone is 20 years old and they don't want to get married, we force him. Nowadays, Bezdin does not force a young man to get married. Furthermore, v'chein mishul akiyim periverivyo ubalisa isha she'ena bas banim kugan akara aiketana. We don't force them. Basically, the Ramah says that nowadays we don't meddle around in people's personal marriage. And the source of the Ramah quotes the Rivash. The Rivash gives a number of reasons. He says if we're going to start mixing around and people shidduchim and say, oh, you're married 10 years and you don't have children, then it's going to cause a lot of strife and arguments and fighting, and basically we have no alternative other than to turn away and ignore it. Furthermore, again, there are some Rishonim that say this does not apply in Chutz La'aretz. A third reason is found in the Gemara Bava Basra on Daf Samach Amud Beis. That the Gemara Bava Basra says, we're in such a bad predicament in Galus. Really, we should decree upon ourselves not to get married. But we can't be goyzer, a gzeira on the tzibur that the tzibur can't handle. In other words, really, we're in such a despicable, demoralizing situation, we should just stop getting married and that would be the end of the Jewish people, but who could handle such a thing? But says the Rivash, if somebody, Bizman Hazeh, is married without children, we're not going to force them to get married because anyway the ideal in the Golus is that we should remain without marriage. The bottom line is Rav Moshe Sternbuch also adds another possibility that maybe the cause of the infertility might be a different sin of the man, of Hotzah Zar Levatala. But the bottom line is that Bizman Hazeh, this halacha is not enforced for a number of reasons. But according to the letter of the law, one who's married 10 years, the Gemara says it's definitely time to assert oneself, to try to see what could be done to be Mekayim the mitzvah approval. Okay, Rabbi said thank you very much for joining tonight. Bracha v'atzlacha. Have a great night, and we'll see you tomorrow night. Be'ezus Hashem. Kol tov. Bye bye.
You've just experienced another Torah class brought to you by TorahAnytime.com.